Captain Jake Morrison stood at the large window of his ship's control room, watching the biggest space station he had ever seen grow larger in front of them. The metal structure was so huge, it looked like a small moon with thousands of lights blinking across its surface. Ships of all shapes and sizes moved around it like tiny insects. Some looked like Earth ships, but most were completely different. Some were long and thin like needles, others were round like balls, and a few looked like they were made of crystal that glowed with strange colors. "This is it," Jake said to his crew. 3 years since we figured out how to travel faster than light, and today we finally get to meet everyone else. Dr. Lisa Harper looked up from her computer screen where she had been studying alien biology reports. She was nervous but excited. For years, she had dreamed of meeting life from other worlds. And now it was actually happening. "The readings I'm getting are incredible," she said. "There are at least 40 different alien species on that station right now." Commander Ryan Burke checked his weapon one more time, even though he knew it was loaded and ready. He was a soldier, and soldiers always prepared for trouble. The aliens had promised this was a peaceful meeting, but Ryan had learned never to trust promises completely. "Remember, we represent all of Earth today," he told the crew. "Let's make a good impression." Ambassador Helen Davis smoothed down her blue dress uniform and took a deep breath. She had spent 2 years learning everything she could about alien cultures and politics. Today would be the biggest test of her life. If she failed, Earth might never get another chance to join the galactic community. "The Galactic Council has agreed to hear our request," she said. "We just need to convince them we're ready to be part of their group." The ship shook slightly as it connected to the space station. Through the walls, they could hear the sound of air being pumped into the connecting tunnel. Jake pressed a button on his control panel. "U-East Liberty to Galactic Council Station. We have successfully docked and are ready to begin diplomatic proceedings." A voice answered, but it didn't sound human. It was higher-pitched and had a strange echo to it. "Human Vessel Liberty, you are cleared to board. Please follow the blue lights to Council Chamber 7. The airlock door opened with a soft hiss. The 4 humans stepped through into a corridor that was clearly not built for people like them. The ceiling was much higher than it needed to be, and the walls curved in ways that felt strange. The blue lights the alien voice had mentioned were actually floating in the air, moving slowly down the hallway like lazy fireflies. Other beings walked through the corridor, and each one was different from the last. A creature that looked like a walking tree nodded politely as it passed them. Something that seemed to be made of living metal rolled by on dozens of tiny legs. 2 beings that looked almost human, except for their bright purple skin and 4 arms, were having a conversation in a language that sounded like singing. "Stay together," Helen whispered as they followed the floating lights. "And remember, don't stare." But it was hard not to stare. Everything was so different from Earth. The air smelled like flowers mixed with something metallic. The gravity felt just a little bit lighter than home. Strange music played softly from hidden speakers, with notes that no human instrument could make. The floating lights led them to a huge round room with seats arranged in circles that went up toward the ceiling like a stadium. Hundreds of alien beings sat in those seats, all looking down at a small platform in the center where the humans were supposed to stand. Jake felt like he was in a zoo, with all the aliens staring at them like they were the animals on display. Tall, thin alien with silver skin and 3 eyes walked up to them. When it spoke, its voice was the same one they had heard on the radio. "I am Supreme Commander Vextar of the Zelfani delegation. We welcome Earth's representatives to the Galactic Council." The alien's 3rd eye, located in the center of its forehead, never stopped moving as it looked at each human. Helen stepped forward and bowed slightly, the way she had practiced. Thank you, Supreme Commander. I am Ambassador Helen Davis, representing the people of Earth. With me are Captain Jake Morrison, Dr. Lisa Harper, and Commander Ryan Burke. Vextar made a sound that might have been laughter. Yes, we have studied your species. Very interesting. Very ... primitive. The word hung in the air like an insult. Before Helen could respond, another alien voice boomed across the chamber. This one was much deeper and sounded angry. Look at their weapons. The voice said, they still use projectile guns and explosive missiles. How can we take seriously a species that fights with rocks and fire? The speaker was a massive creature that looked like a cross between a bear and a lizard, with scales instead of fur and teeth as long as Helen's fingers. Its red eyes glowed as it stood up from its seat. I am General Vexmail of the Cronan Empire, it announced. We have been watching your species since you achieved spaceflight. Your military technology is laughable. You fire metal bullets at your enemies, like savages throwing spears. Ryan's hand moved toward his weapon, but Helen caught his arm and shook her head slightly. Getting into a fight here would ruin everything. Our weapons may seem simple, Helen said, keeping her voice calm and steady, but they are effective. Humans have always believed in using tools that work, regardless of how complex they are. This caused a wave of what sounded like laughter from the alien audience. Some of the sounds were high-pitched whistles, others were low rumbles, and a few sounded like water bubbling. Vextar raised one of its 4 arms for silence. The Council has reviewed Earth's application for membership. Your species has achieved faster-than-light travel, which is impressive for such a young civilization. You have also shown some technological advancement in areas like computing and medicine. However, General Vexmal interrupted. Your military doctrine is centuries behind the rest of the galaxy. We use plasma cannons that can melt through the strongest armor. We have particle beam weapons that can destroy a ship's electronics from the inside. We employ quantum disruptors that can make enemy vessels simply cease to exist. And you throw pieces of metal at very high speeds. Dr. Harper decided to speak up. With respect, General, kinetic weapons have several advantages. They are reliable, they don't require exotic materials, and they can't be jammed by electronic interference. Kinetic weapons, repeated another alien, this one looking like a giant praying mantis with crystal wings. Is that what you call throwing? Rocks? More laughter filled the chamber. Jake felt his face getting red with anger, but he stayed quiet. Helen was the diplomat here. Not him got. Helen took a deep breath and addressed the entire council. People of the Galactic Council, humanity? Maybe young and our technology may seem simple to you, but we have much to offer. We are explorers, scientists, and builders. We have survived wars, diseases, and disasters that would have destroyed weaker species. We have learned to work together despite our differences. Pretty words, said Vextar, but words are not enough. The galaxy is a dangerous place. The Council needs members who can defend themselves and others. How can we trust our safety to a species that still fights with ancient weapons? The chamber fell silent, except for the soft alien music still playing in the background. Helen knew. This was the most important moment of her life. Everything she said next would determine humanity's future among the stars. We understand your concerns, she said, but we ask you to judge us not just by our weapons, but by our character. Humans never give up. When faced with impossible odds, we find ways to survive and win. Our weapons may be simple, but they have served us well for thousands of years. Supreme Commander Vextar looked around the chamber, seeming to count votes with its 3 eyes. Finally, it spoke. The Council will grant Earth provisional membership. You will have access to basic trade, agreements, and diplomatic channels. However, your military participation will be limited until you upgrade your weapon systems to galactic standards. Helen smiled, but she could tell this was not the victory she had hoped for. They were being treated like children who needed supervision. "We accept the Council's generous offer," she said formally. As the four humans were escorted out of the chamber, they could hear aliens talking behind them in dozens of different languages. Even without understanding the words, the tone was clear. The galaxy saw humanity as a curiosity, a primitive species that had somehow stumbled into space travel. They were not taken seriously as warriors or equals. "Well," Jake said as they walked back toward their ship, "that could have gone better." "Could have gone worse, too," Ryan added. "At least they didn't laugh us out of the room entirely." Dr. Harper was quiet, thinking about everything she had observed. "Did you notice something?" she finally asked. They all seemed very confident about their advanced weapons, almost like they've never faced an enemy that could challenge them. Helen nodded slowly. "The galaxy has been at peace for a long time. Maybe too long. They've forgotten that sometimes the old ways work just as well as the new ones." None of them knew it yet, but in 6 months, the galaxy would remember why that was important. And humanity's primitive weapons would prove to be exactly what everyone needed. 6 months had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Council. Earth ships patrolled the Outer Rim territories, doing simple jobs like cargo escort and pirate hunting. Most aliens still treated humans like junior partners who needed to prove themselves. Fleet Admiral Susan Martinez had grown tired of the constant reminders that human weapons were outdated and primitive. Susan stood in the command center of Earth's newest military base on Titan Station, watching the holographic displays that showed ship movements throughout the galaxy. Her short gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her brown eyes missed nothing as she studied the tactical information. After 30 years in Earth's Navy, she had learned to spot trouble before it found her. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Commander Pete Collins from his position at the sensor station. Pete was young, maybe 25, with blonde hair and green eyes that always seemed to be analyzing something. He had been one of the first humans to graduate from the Galactic Council's Advanced Sensor Training Program. "I'm picking up something strange on the long-range scanners." Susan walked over to Pete's station and looked at the display. Instead of the usual scattered dots that showed normal space traffic, there was a solid wall of contacts moving toward Council space. The computer was having trouble counting them all, but the number kept climbing. 100 ships. 200. 500. "That's impossible," Susan said quietly. "There's no fleet that big in Council space." Pete's fingers moved quickly across his controls, trying to get better readings. "The contacts are still about 3 days out, but they're moving fast. Faster than anything in the Council database. And Admiral, the ships are huge. Some of them are reading as 5 kilometers long." Susan felt a cold chill run down her spine. In all her years of military service, she had never seen anything like this. "Send a priority message to Earth and to the Council headquarters. Tell them we have a massive unknown fleet approaching Council space." "Already done, Admiral," Pete replied. "But there's something else." The computer finally got a match on the ship designs. "They're HFY." The name made Susan freeze. She had studied military history, and she knew that name. The HFY were the boogeymen of galactic history, the ancient enemy that had nearly destroyed all life in the galaxy 1,000 years ago. They had been defeated and driven beyond the galactic rim, never to return. At least, that's what everyone had believed. "Are you sure?" Susan asked. Pete nodded grimly. "Computer confirms it. Ship designs match historical records from the last HFY War. Admiral, according to these readings, there are over 800 ships in that fleet." Susan activated the main communication system. Her voice echoed through every human ship and base in the sector. "This is Admiral Martinez to all Earth forces. We are at maximum alert status. All ships return to base immediately. All personnel report to battle stations." 3 hours later, Susan stood in the Council's emergency meeting room, surrounded by alien military leaders who all looked as worried as she felt. The room was circular with a high ceiling, and holographic displays showed the approaching Cathay fleet from every angle. Supreme. Commander Vextar's three eyes moved constantly as he studied the tactical displays. His silver skin seemed paler than usual. "This should not be possible," he said. "The Cathay were completely defeated. Our ancestors drove them beyond the edge of known space." General Vexmol, a massive bear lizard creature, slammed one of his huge fists on the table. "Defeated but not destroyed, it seems. And they have had 1,000 years to prepare for revenge." A new voice spoke from across the room. Admiral Kekstala was a member of the Vorthan species, looking like a tall, thin humanoid with blue skin and no hair. Her people had some of the most advanced military technology in the galaxy. "We have reviewed the historical records of the last war. The Cathay used energy weapons similar to our own, but their ships had some kind of adaptive shielding that became more effective as the war continued." "What kind of adaptive shielding?" Susan asked. Admiral Kekstala's large black eyes focused on her. "The records are not complete, but it appears their shields learned to counter whatever weapons were used against them. By the end of the war, our plasma cannons and particle beams were almost useless. How were they finally defeated?" "Susan." The room fell silent. Finally, Vextar spoke. "The records of the final battle are classified. What we know is that it required a massive alliance of every species in the galaxy, and the cost was enormous. Entire species were wiped out. Whole star systems were destroyed." Susan looked around the room at the alien faces. Some looked confident, others worried, but all of them seemed to believe their modern weapons would be enough. "What about their current capabilities? How much have they improved in 1,000 years?" "We will find out soon enough," General Vexmol rumbled. "Our scouts report the Cathay fleet will reach the outer colonies in 18 hours. The meeting broke up with various species, promising to send their fleets to defensive positions. Susan noticed that most of the aliens seemed to think this would be like fighting any other enemy. They had plasma cannons that could melt through the strongest armor. They had particle beams that could fry electronics from the inside out. They had quantum disruptors that could make enemy ships simply disappear. What could possibly go wrong? Susan returned to her command center, where Pete was coordinating with Earth's defense forces. "What's our status?" she asked. "All Earth ships are in position," Pete reported. 43 vessels total, including our newest dreadnought, the U's Guardian. Not much compared to 800 enemy ships, but we're ready to fight. Any word from the first contact with the Cathay? Pete's expression darkened. The Altarian Third Fleet engaged them 2 hours ago at the Proxima colony. Admiral, the results were not good. A holographic display showed the battle. Susan watched as dozens of sleek Altarian ships fired their advanced plasma weapons at the approaching Cathay vessels. The enemy ships were dark and angular, looking more like flying mountains than spacecraft. But when the plasma beams hit them, something incredible happened. The energy simply disappeared, absorbed by shields that glowed brighter with each impact. "The Cathay shields are absorbing the energy attacks," Pete explained. "The more the Altarians shoot, the stronger the shields become. And when the Cathay return fire," Susan watched in horror as beams of crackling energy lanced out from the enemy ships. When they hit the Altarian vessels, the ships simply came apart, torn to pieces by weapons that seemed to ignore their shields and armor entirely. Casualty report? Susan asked quietly. Total loss. 37 Altarian ships destroyed. No survivors detected. The Kethai didn't even slow down. Similar reports came in over the next few hours. The Cronin Empire's heaviest battle cruisers, armed with the most powerful weapons in the galaxy, lasted less than 10 minutes against the Kethai. The elegant Selthani fleet, with their precision particle beam arrays, were wiped out without destroying a single enemy ship. Dr. Lisa Harper's voice came over the communication system from Earth. Admiral Martinez, I've been studying the battle. Recordings. The Kethai shields seem specifically designed to counter energy-based weapons. They're not just blocking the attacks, they're feeding on them. What do you mean, feeding on them? Susan asked. Every time an energy weapon hits there. The shields get stronger. It's like they're using our own weapons to power their defenses. Admiral, I think this is why they disappeared for 1,000 years. They've been preparing for exactly this kind of war. Susan looked at the tactical display, showing Kethai forces advancing deeper into Council space. World after world fell to their assault. Millions of aliens were fleeing their homes, running from an enemy that seemed unstoppable. Dr. Harper, what about kinetic weapons? Have any of the Council species tried using projectile weapons against them? There was a long pause. Admiral, no one in the Council uses kinetic weapons anymore. We're the only species that still has them. Everyone else moved to energy weapons centuries ago. Susan felt something click in her mind. Pete, bring up the tactical analysis of human weapons versus Kethai technology. Pete's fingers flew over his controls. Running the simulation now. Admiral, if our analysis is correct, our railguns and missile systems might actually work against them. Their shields are designed to absorb and redirect energy, but they might not be able to handle physical projectiles. Might not be able to handle them? Susan repeated. Well, it's theoretical, Pete admitted. No one has tried shooting bullets at them yet. Susan looked at the display showing the advancing Kethai fleet. In 12 hours, they would reach the next major colony world. In 24 hours, they might be attacking Earth itself. The entire galaxy was counting on energy weapons that clearly didn't work. Get me a direct line to the Galactic Council, Susan ordered, and prepare all Earth forces for immediate deployment. Admiral, we only have 43 ships. They have 800. Susan smiled grimly. Pete, sometimes it's not about how many ships you have. Sometimes it's about having the right kind of ships. She opened a communication channel to Earth. This is Admiral Martinez, to Earth Command. I need you to load every railgun round we have. Every missile, every kinetic weapon in our arsenal. And I need you to do it fast. Admiral Susan Martinez stood on the bridge of the USS Defiant, humanity's newest and most powerful warship. Through the massive viewing window, she could see the combined fleet gathering at Centauri Gate. Ships from dozens of species floated. In formation, their hulls gleaming under the light of 3 nearby stars. It was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. But Susan knew it might not be enough. Captain Lisa Morgan walked up beside her admiral, checking the tactical displays on her tablet. Lisa was 32 years old with red hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. She had been chosen to command the Defiant because she was one of the few human captains who understood both kinetic and energy weapon systems. Final count shows 843 Council ships, Lisa reported. The Kethai fleet is still at approximately 800 vessels, but their ships are much larger than ours. Susan nodded grimly. What about the weapon modifications? How many Council ships agreed to install kinetic weapons? About half, Lisa said. The Vorthan and Altarian fleets were willing to try railguns and missile systems. Most of the smaller species followed their lead. But the Cronin Empire and several other major powers refused to modify their ships. General Vex, Mull still thinks. "We're idiots," Susan said with a slight smile. "He'll change his mind if this works," Lisa replied. "The question is whether we'll all live long enough to see it." The communication system crackled to life. "All fleet commanders. This is Supreme Commander Vextar aboard the flagship Unity. Cathai forces will arrive in the system in 47 minutes. All ships move to battle positions." Susan activated the Defiant's internal communication system. "All hands, this is Admiral Martinez, battle stations. We are about to engage an enemy that has not been defeated in over 1,000 years. Today, we find out if human weapons can succeed where everyone else has failed." Throughout the ship, crew members hurried to their positions. In the weapon bays, massive railguns were loaded with depleted uranium rounds designed to punch through the heaviest armor. Missile tubes were filled with nuclear warheads and kinetic penetrators. Every human ship in the fleet was armed with weapons the rest of the galaxy considered obsolete. Commander Ashley Stone sat at the tactical station, her dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. She had spent the last 3 hours coordinating, targeting data with the other human ships. "Admiral, all human vessels report ready. The UES Guardian, the UES Liberty, and 38 other ships are in position. What about the Council ships with kinetic weapons?" Susan asked. "The Vorthan ships have railguns installed and operational," Ashley reported. "The Altarians managed to mount missile launchers on most of their cruisers. The other species are reporting various levels of readiness." Susan studied the holographic battle display floating in front of her. The human ships were spread throughout the fleet formation, positioned to provide kinetic fire support wherever it was needed most. The plan was simple in theory, but untested in practice. When the Cathai arrived, the Council ships would engage with energy weapons as usual. When those weapons inevitably failed, the human ships would open fire with kinetic weapons to see what happened. "Contacts," Ashley called out suddenly. Multiple large signatures dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. The main display changed to show the sensor readings. Dark shapes appeared one by one as the Cathai fleet arrived. Each enemy ship was massive, some over 5 kilometers long, with angular hulls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved in perfect formation, advancing toward the Council fleet like a wall of death. 812 Cathai vessels confirmed, Ashley reported. They're maintaining standard battle formation and approaching at 0.7 light speed. Supreme Commander Vextar's voice came over the fleet communication channel. "All Council forces engage at maximum range. Target the lead ships with concentrated fire." The space around Centauri Gate lit up with energy weapons. Hundreds of plasma. Cannons fired brilliant beams of superheated matter. Particle beam weapons created threads of deadly radiation that connected the fleets like glowing spider webs. Quantum disruptors launched waves of force that could tear apart molecular bonds. For a moment, it looked like the massive barrage might work. The Cathai ships were hit by more firepower than had ever been concentrated in one place before. There, dark hulls were surrounded by explosions of light as energy weapons struck their shields. But then the shields began to glow brighter. The more energy that hit them, the more powerful they became. Within minutes, the Cathai shields were absorbing the Council weapons completely, turning the enemy fleet into a collection of glowing stars. Energy weapon effectiveness dropping rapidly, Ashley reported. Cathai shields are now operating at 400% of baseline strength. The Cathai return fire was devastating. Dark energy beams lanced out from their ships, striking Council vessels with surgical precision. When the beams hit, ships simply came apart. Hulls cracked like eggshells. Entire sections of vessels exploded outward into space. Within the first 5 minutes of battle, Over 60 council ships had been destroyed. This is exactly what happened at every other engagement, Lisa said, watching the slaughter on the tactical display. Our energy weapons are feeding their shields, and their weapons are cutting through our defenses like they don't exist. Susan opened a channel to all human ships. All Earth vessels, this is Admiral Martinez. You are authorized to engage with kinetic weapons. Target the largest HFY. Ships first. Let's see if thousand-year-old technology can teach these aliens something new. The UE Scifiant's main railgun rotated toward the nearest HFY battleship. The weapon was as long as a city block and could accelerate a depleted uranium round to 20% of light speed. When it fired, there was no flash of light or beam of energy. There was only a metal projectile moving so fast it was invisible to the naked eye. The railgun round hit the HFY ship's shields, and something unexpected happened. Instead of being absorbed like the energy weapons, the projectile punched straight through the shield barrier like it wasn't there. The round struck the alien ship's hull and kept going, tearing a hole completely through the vessel from front to back. Direct hit, Ashley shouted. The kinetic round penetrated their shields and hull. The target is showing massive internal damage. Across the battlefield, other human ships were firing their weapons with similar results. Railgun rounds from the U.S. Guardian smashed through HFY armor plating. Missile salvos from the U.S. Liberty exploded against enemy hulls, sending debris spinning away into space. For the first time in the war, HFY ships were taking real damage. The kinetic weapons are working, Lisa said with excitement. Their shields can't absorb physical projectiles. But the celebration was short-lived. The HFY fleet quickly adapted to the new threat, focusing their return fire on the human ships. Dark energy beams targeted every vessel flying the Earth flag. The human fleet was outnumbered 20-1, and the enemy was determined to eliminate this new threat. U.S. Challenger has been destroyed, Ashley reported grimly. U.S. Phoenix is reporting severe damage. We're losing ships fast. Susan realized they needed to change tactics quickly. Signal all human vessels to coordinate with council ships. Use the larger alien ships as cover while we reload and retarget. The Vorthan Admiral Kextala opened a communication channel. Admiral Martinez, our railguns are also proving effective against HFY shields. We are targeting their command vessels. On the display, Susan could see Vorthan ships firing newly installed railguns at the largest HFY vessels. The results were the same as with human weapons. Kinetic rounds passed through energy shields, like they were made of paper, striking the enemy hulls with devastating force. All ships with kinetic weapons, concentrate fire on Grid 7 Alpha, Susan ordered. If we can destroy their flagship, it might disrupt their formation. 20 human ships and 30 Vorthan vessels turned their railguns toward the massive HFY command ship. The coordinated barrage sent dozens of kinetic rounds flying toward the target at incredible speed. The enemy ship's shields flared as they tried to stop the projectiles, but the rounds passed through without slowing down. The HFY flagship shuddered under the impact of multiple railgun hits. Hull plating cracked and atmosphere vented into space. Internal explosions lit up the ship's interior through the holes punched in its armor. For a moment, Susan thought they had succeeded in destroying the enemy command vessel, but the HFY were not finished. The damaged flagship fired a massive energy beam directly at the U.S. Defiant. The beam was wider than the human ship and carried enough power to destroy Small Moon. Evasive maneuvers, Susan shouted. Captain Lisa Morgan threw the Defiant into a sharp turn, pushing the ship's engines beyond their safety limits. The HFY beam missed by less than a kilometer, but the near miss was enough to overload several of the ship's systems. Damage report, Susan called. Main railgun is offline. Ashley reported. Secondary weapons are still operational, but we've lost most of our armor plating on the port side. Around them, the battle continued to rage. Human and Vorthan ships with kinetic weapons were slowly gaining the upper hand, but the cost was enormous. The battle at Centauri Gate lasted 14 hours. When the last Kethai ship finally exploded under concentrated railgun fire, the combined fleet had lost over 400 vessels, but they had won. The enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for 1,000 years was finally defeated, and it was humanity's kinetic weapons that had made the difference. Admiral Susan Martinez stood in the emergency medical bay of the UES Defiant, having her arm treated for burns from a plasma conduit. Explosion. Around her, other wounded crew members were being cared for by human and alien medics working side by side. The victory felt hollow when she thought about all the people who had died to achieve it. Dr. Lisa Harper hurried into the medical bay, her tablet clutched tightly in her hands. Her eyes were bright with excitement, despite the exhaustion that showed on her face. "Admiral, I found something in the Kethai wreckage. Something incredible." "What kind of something?" Susan asked, wincing as the medic sealed the burns on her. "Arm, records, historical files." The Kethai kept detailed information about their first war with the galaxy. "And Admiral, the records mentioned the Tordan extensively." Susan's attention focused completely on Lisa. "The extinct species you found references to earlier?" "They're not extinct," Lisa said quietly. "At least they weren't when they disappeared. Admiral, I think the Tordan are still alive. And I think they've been hiding on Earth for the past 10,000 years." 3 days later, Captain Jake Morrison stood in the frozen wasteland of Antarctica, watching as excavation equipment cleared away tons of ice and rock. The coordinates Dr. Harper had found in the Tordan database had led them to this remote location, hundreds of miles from the nearest research station. Commander Ryan Burke pulled his thick winter coat tighter against the Antarctic wind. "I still don't understand how alien ruins could be buried under miles of ice without anyone noticing." "Because they were designed to look like natural rock formations," Lisa explained, pointing at the strange geometric patterns emerging from the ice. "The Tordan were masters of camouflage technology. What looks like random geological features are actually carefully constructed buildings." Ambassador Helen Davis stood nearby, recording everything with her camera. The discovery was too important to trust to memory alone. If Dr. Harper is right, this could change everything we know about human history. The excavation team worked carefully, using heated tools to melt away the ice without damaging whatever lay beneath. As more of the structure was revealed, it became clear that this was not a natural formation. The walls were too straight, the angles too precise. Strange symbols were carved into the stone, symbols that seemed almost familiar, but not quite readable. "There," Lisa said suddenly, pointing at a section of wall that had just been uncovered. "That symbol there. I've seen it before in the Kethai records." Jake walked closer to examine the carving. The symbol was complex, with interlocking circles and lines that seemed to move when he looked at them from different angles. "What does it mean?" "According to the Kethai files, it means guardian or protector," Lisa said. "The Tordan used it to mark their most important facilities." The excavation continued for hours until finally they found what they were looking for. A doorway sealed with some kind of energy barrier that shimmered like heat waves. As they approached, the barrier suddenly disappeared, as if it had been waiting for them. Beyond the doorway was a corridor that stretched deeper into the ice. The walls glowed with a soft blue light that had no visible source. The air was warm. Despite being surrounded by frozen Antarctic ice, everything about the place felt ancient, but somehow alive. "Motion sensors," Ryan said, checking his equipment. "Something just activated when we walked in." They moved carefully down the corridor, following the blue lights deeper into the structure. The walls were covered with more symbols and what looked like star charts showing the positions of planets and galaxies. Some of the star patterns were familiar. Others showed constellations that Jake had never seen before. At the end of the corridor, they found a large circular room with a raised platform. In the center, on the platform, stood something that made them all stop in amazement. It was clearly a machine of some kind, but unlike any technology they had ever seen. Crystal formations grew out of metal components in patterns that seemed both organic and artificial. As they approached the machine, it began to glow brighter. The crystals pulsed with light in a rhythm that reminded Jake of a heartbeat. Then, without warning, a holographic figure appeared above the platform. The figure looked almost human, but there were subtle differences. The being was taller and thinner than most humans, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to glow with their own light. When it spoke, the words came out in perfect English, though Jake could tell the being was using some kind of translation technology. "Greetings, children of Earth," the hologram said, in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "I am Keeper Zalthek of the Turgan. If you are seeing this message, then the Kethai have returned, and you have successfully used our gift to defeat them." Lisa stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her shock. "Your Turdan? But the records say your people were wiped out thousands of years ago." The hologram seemed to focus on her, though Jake wasn't sure how. A recording could do that. "We were not wiped out, young scientist. We chose to hide. The galaxy believed us destroyed because it was safer for everyone if they thought we were gone." "Why?" Helen asked. "Why hide for so long?" "Because the Kethai were not truly defeated in the First War," Zalthek explained. "They escaped beyond the galactic rim and began preparing for their return. We knew they would come back stronger, with defenses against every weapon the galaxy possessed. So we prepared a different kind of defense." The hologram gestured toward them. "We gave the gift of kinetic weapons to a young species called humans. We taught your ancestors to value weapons that work, regardless of how simple they might seem. We embedded knowledge into your culture that would ensure you never completely abandoned the old ways." Jake felt his understanding of human history shifting. "You've been influencing human development for thousands of years?" "Not influencing," Zalthek corrected. "Guiding. We gave you the tools and knowledge, but humans chose how to use them. Your species' natural stubbornness and refusal to give up working solutions did the rest." Ryan looked around the chamber at all the advanced technology. "If your people are so advanced, why didn't you fight the Kethai yourselves?" "Because the galaxy needed to learn to defend itself," the hologram replied. "If we had fought the Kethai directly, other species would have become dependent on us. They would never have developed their own strength. By remaining hidden and working through humanity, we ensured that the galaxy would be stronger in the long run." Lisa was studying the symbols on the walls with growing excitement. "The kinetic weapons technology you gave us. It's not just about bullets and missiles, is it? There's something more advanced here." Zalthek nodded approvingly. "Very perceptive. The principles behind kinetic weapons extend far beyond simple projectiles. Matter itself can be weaponized in ways the galaxy has forgotten. But that knowledge is for the future, when your species is ready." The hologram began to fade slightly, indicating the message was nearing its end. "The immediate threat is over, but there will be other challenges. The galaxy must learn to balance advancement with wisdom, to embrace new technology without abandoning proven methods." Helen stepped forward urgently. "Wait, are there other Turdans still alive? Can we meet them?" "We are here," Zalthek said simply. "We have always been here, hidden among the species we guide. Some of us may choose to reveal ourselves now that the great test is over. Others will remain hidden, continuing our work in no secret. The hologram looked directly at each of them in turn. Remember this lesson, children of Earth. True strength comes not from having the most advanced technology, but from understanding when to use the right tool for the job. Your species saved the galaxy not because your weapons were the newest, but because they were the most appropriate. As the message ended and the hologram disappeared, the four humans stood in silence, trying to process everything they had learned. The machine on the platform continued to glow softly, as if waiting for them to ask more questions. So, Jake said finally, humanity has been the galaxy's insurance policy for 10,000 years, and we never knew it. And now everyone knows why we never gave up kinetic weapons, Ryan added. Because an ancient alien species programmed us not to. Lisa shook her head. Not programmed, guided. There's a difference. The Turdan gave us knowledge, but humans made the choice to keep using it. Helen was already thinking about the political implications. This changes everything. The Galactic Council will need to completely rethink their approach to technology and warfare. When they returned to civilization 3 days later, the galaxy was already changing. Species that had mocked human weapons were now requesting technical assistance to build their own kinetic weapon systems. The Cronin Empire, led by General Vexmal, formally apologized to humanity and asked for help upgrading their military doctrine. Supreme Commander Vexstar addressed the full Galactic Council in a session broadcast throughout known space. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in its 1,000-year history. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the great chamber, but instead of the usual calm discussions, panic filled the air. Voices in dozens of languages created a chaos of sound as species leaders tried to understand how their most advanced weapons had failed so completely. Supreme Chancellor Zilanara of the Altarian Federation stood at the center podium, her blue skin pale with stress. She was normally calm and controlled, but today her voice shook as she spoke. In the past 24 hours, we have lost contact with 17 colony worlds. Our combined fleets have engaged the Kethi forces 12 times. Every engagement has ended in total defeat. The holographic displays around the chamber showed the grim statistics. Over 300 Council ships destroyed. 0 Kethi losses. Confirmed. The enemy fleet continued to advance toward the core worlds, sweeping aside everything in their path like they were brushing away insects. Commander Ryan Burke sat in the human delegation section, watching the alien leaders argue with each other. His soldier's mind was analyzing everything he heard, looking for weaknesses and opportunities. Next to him, Ambassador Helen Davis took notes on her tablet, trying to keep track of all the different proposals being shouted across the chamber. The Vorthan suggest we evacuate all civilian populations to the inner systems, Helen whispered to Ryan. The Cronin want to make a final stand at the Helios defense line. The Selfani think we should try to negotiate. What do you think? Ryan asked quietly. Helen looked at the displays showing Kethi ships destroying another Council fleet. I think we're all going to die unless we try something different. General Vexmal's deep voice boomed across the chamber, cutting through the noise. Enough talk, we need action. I propose we gather every remaining ship into one massive fleet. If we concentrate all our firepower in one place, surely we can break through their defenses. Admiral Kexdala shook her blue head sadly. General, we have already tried concentrated firepower. The more energy we direct at their shields, the stronger the shields become. It is like trying to put out a fire by pouring fuel on it. Then what do you suggest? Vexmal snarled. That we simply surrender? Supreme Commander Vegstar's 3 eyes focused on the human delegation. Perhaps we should hear from our newest members. The humans have been studying our battle reports. Do they have any insights? All conversation stopped as hundreds of alien eyes turned toward the human section. Ryan felt his heart rate increase, but he stood up slowly. He had faced enemy fire many times, but this felt more dangerous somehow. "Thank you, Supreme Commander," Ryan said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "We have indeed been studying the battle reports, and we believe we may have identified the problem." "The problem is obvious," General Vexmol interrupted. "The Kethai have superior technology." "With respect, General, that's not entirely correct," Ryan continued. "The Kethai don't have superior technology. They have technology specifically designed to counter yours." A wave of confused murmurs swept through the chamber. Supreme Chancellor Zelenara raised her hand for silence. "Please explain, Commander Burke." Ryan activated his tablet, and the chamber's displays showed his analysis. Every weapon system in the Council arsenal is energy-based. Plasma cannons, particle beams, quantum disruptors, photon torpedoes. They all work by directing various forms of energy at the target. "Of course they do," Admiral Kextala said impatiently. "Energy weapons are more efficient, more powerful, and more precise than primitive kinetic weapons." "That may be true under normal circumstances," Ryan agreed. "But the Kethai shields are not normal. They're designed to absorb, store, and redirect energy attacks. The more energy you throw at them, the stronger they become." Dr. Lisa Harper stood up from her seat next to Ryan. "If I may add to Commander Burke's analysis, we believe the Kethai spent their 1,000 years of exile specifically preparing for this kind of war. They studied how the galaxy defeated them before, and they built defenses against every energy weapon currently in use." "This is speculation," General Vexmol growled. "What proof do you have?" Lisa activated her own display. Computer analysis of the battle recordings shows that Kethai's shield efficiency increases by an average of 12% with each energy weapon impact. By the end of most engagements, their shields are operating at nearly 300% of their baseline strength. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Supreme Commander Vexstar was the first to speak. "If this analysis is correct, then our weapons are not just ineffective against the Kethai. They are actually making the enemy stronger." "Exactly," Ryan said, "which is why we need to try a different approach." "What kind of different approach?" Chancellor Zelenara asked. Ryan took a deep breath. "Kinetic weapons, physical projectiles, old-fashioned bullets and missiles." The reaction was immediate and loud. Laughter, shouting, and what sounded like cursing in a dozen alien languages filled the chamber. General Vexmol's roar of amusement was louder than all the rest. "You want used to fight starships with bullets?" The Cronin general bellowed. "Have you lost your minds? Kinetic weapons are useless against modern armor and shielding." "Are they?" Helen Davis stood up, her diplomatic training helping her stay calm despite the hostile reactions. "General, with respect, when was the last time anyone in the Council actually tested kinetic weapons against modern defenses?" The laughter died down slightly. Vexmol's red eyes narrowed. "We do not test obsolete weapons because they are obsolete. A metal bullet cannot penetrate quantum-hardened armor plating." "Maybe not," Ryan admitted. "But what if the armor plating is designed specifically to stop energy weapons? What if it has weaknesses that only kinetic weapons can exploit?" Admiral Kextala's expression had changed from amusement to thoughtful consideration. "The human makes an interesting point. Our armor and shielding technologies have evolved specifically to counter energy-based attacks. We may have inadvertently created vulnerabilities to kinetic weapons." "This is ridiculous," another voice called out. "Even if kinetic weapons could somehow penetrate their defenses, human ships are too small and too few to make a difference. They have less than 50 vessels in their entire fleet." Lisa stepped forward again. That's true, but we're not suggesting humans fight alone. We're suggesting that Council forces integrate kinetic weapons into their arsenals. Many of your ships could be retrofitted with railguns or missile launchers in a matter of hours. Retrofit our advanced warships with primitive weapons? General Vexmol seemed genuinely offended by the suggestion. The Cronin Empire has spent centuries perfecting plasma cannon technology. You want us to replace our weapons with metal bullets? We want you to supplement your weapons, Helen clarified. Keep your energy weapons for use against normal enemies, but add kinetic weapons for use against the Cathai. Supreme Commander Vexstar's middle eye focused intently on the humans. This is all theoretical. You have no proof that kinetic weapons will be more effective. You're right, Ryan admitted. We don't have proof. But we do have logic. The Cathai prepared for 1,000 years to fight energy weapons. There's no indication they prepared to fight kinetic weapons, because no one in the galaxy uses them. Any more except humans. Chancellor Zilinara looked around the chamber at the other leaders. The human proposal has some merit, but it is also extremely risky. If we strip energy weapons from our ships to install kinetic weapons, and the kinetic weapons prove ineffective, we will be defenseless. With respect, Chancellor, Helen said quietly, you're already defenseless. Your energy weapons aren't working. At least kinetic weapons offer a chance. The chamber erupted in arguments again. Some species were willing to consider the human proposal, while others rejected it completely. The Vorthan delegation was divided among themselves. The Zelthani seemed intrigued by the scientific possibilities. The Cronin remained stubbornly opposed to any change in their military doctrine. While the aliens argued, Dr. Lisa Harper was working quietly on her tablet, accessing the Council's historical database. Something had been bothering her since the first Cathai attack, and she was determined to find answers. Ryan, she whispered, I found something interesting in the historical records. Ryan leaned over to look at her screen. What is it? Information about the species that helped defeat the Cathai in the original war. Most of the records are classified or corrupted, but I found references to a species called the Turdan. Never heard of them, Ryan said. That's because they're extinct. They were completely wiped out during or shortly after the first Cathai war. But listen to this. Lisa read from her tablet. The Turdan were described as masters of matter disruption technology and kinetic warfare systems. Ryan's eyes widened. Kinetic warfare systems? You mean they used weapons like ours? It gets better, Lisa continued. According to this fragment, the Turdan were instrumental in the final defeat of the Cathai fleet. The records suggest they had some kind of special weapon that could penetrate Cathai defenses. Why haven't the Council historians mentioned this? Lisa showed him another section of the database. Because most of the records about the Turdan are classified at the highest levels.